You have a difficult manager, clueless executives, and some of your coworkers are cool, but you also have to work with some people who just make everything harder than it needs to be. This is going to make all of your interactions make so much more sense. I've been there. As my career has grown, I've faced all kinds of flavors of managers, some of whom I still love, and some of whom, let's just say that with the benefit of hindsight, I can confidently say it was them and not me. I've also been a manager and mentor, coaching people through challenging relationships at work, preparing them to go in front of the tough executive, or navigating their interactions with that one stakeholder together. So I know how hard this can be, and also what an impact it can make for your career and your happiness at work if you're able to unlock the superpowers we're about to discuss. Now, what I'm about to say is going to make some of you mad. Others are going to scoff and say that this is too simple of an idea to be useful. But the really smart ones will hear me out for a minute or two to find out if something I have to say about this could be useful. And I promise it will be. The secret superpower to dealing with tough managers, seemingly inept executives, and stakeholders that just make everything harder is empathy. Sorry. But it's true. Now, I'm not talking about boo-hoo, I feel bad for my boss because he has to make more money than me. It must be hard to live in such a big house. And I'm not talking about a performative surface level expression of, I know how hard this must be for you. No, I'm talking about hard, deep, intellectual, mental, and emotional work. To understand a human so much that you know how to care about the things that they care about. On some level, love them maybe even. Even, or especially, if you don't get along and they're making your workdays hard. It's an idea that is expressed in this book, Ender's Game, and further explored in the sequel, Speaker for the Dead. I'm going to read just a short quote. It came down to this. In the moment when I truly understand my enemy, understand him well enough to defeat him, then in that very moment, I also love him. I think it's impossible to really understand somebody, what they want, what they believe, and not love them the way they love themselves. And then, in that very moment when I love them, you beat them. Now, I'm not saying we need to treat our coworkers as enemies. Not at all. The goal isn't to defeat them. Our goal is just to be able to work well with them. But the approach is the same. To know how to defeat or work well with someone who is acting in a way that feels like they're an enemy, we need to understand them, what they want, what they believe, and what they care about. To express the kind of deep empathy that leads to a non-romantic kind of love, or at least real care. Okay, quick disclaimer. I know that there are some truly toxic bosses out there. I'm not saying that you have to get along with harassment. We're not talking about anything illegal here. But too often our society is quick to say, it's their fault, this is toxic, and then just give up. If we do that, we miss the opportunity to develop a skill set that would have helped us to succeed regardless of who we have to work with. Because no matter where you work, you know that you're going to be more successful if you can find a way to not just get along, but shine when you're working with those difficult personalities. Okay, so if you're with me that this could be worth investing in, let's talk about how you do it, some examples of what it looks like in practice, and then where you go from here. It starts with curiosity. Instead of, they're a jerk and irrational and an idiot who doesn't know what they're doing. You have to start from the assumption that the other person is a professional and a rational human who has a good reason, from their perspective, to be doing what they're doing. You might be proved wrong, but it might be the case. So then try to figure out what that good reason might be. Story time. I just joined a new team as manager of several product managers. Most of the rest of the organization had been hired before I was, but we were all still fairly new. We'd been given the mandate to lead the product development for a particular offering at the company. Almost immediately, I started to hear from my team that they were frustrated with certain coworkers from a different organization. And it wasn't just my team, but other people in our organization that also reported they were having a lot of trouble with people from this other team. They'd get into meetings where our group was supposed to be taking the lead and driving decisions, and this other team would consistently undermine them, contradict their decisions, try to take over the meeting, and then work against them after the meeting. By the time I got there, my team was so frustrated. They wanted the other folks to stop being jerks. But instead of getting mad, I got curious. It turns out that despite what we had been told, not everyone was on the same page about the role of our new organization. In fact, these troublesome coworkers were still being told by their managers that they had the exact same responsibilities as my team. So of course they were trying to take over the meeting. From their perspective, that was their job. With this shift in perspective, it quickly became clear that the other team weren't jerks trying to undermine people. They had a good reason. And frankly, they probably felt the same way about us. Then, of course, you have to get curious about why their managers are telling them that, and then the experience and perspectives of their managers and executives in order to understand both how we ended up here and how do we fix it. We did eventually sort through all of those layers. And some of our best partnerships in that company ended up being between my team and the team that had formerly been their perceived antagonists. The solution ended up being so much empathy every step of the way. As you start to get good at this, you realize that not only does it help you navigate these complex interactions, but it also sets you up for promotions because you start seeing the bigger picture and focusing on things that your managers and executives care about. It's super common when you're in charge of a particular function to always see things through the lens of that function. After all, things that we're close to end up taking up a lot of our view. This leads to getting frustrated with other teams or with leaders who aren't prioritizing the right problems. You can see how obviously we should be investing more in fixing fill in the blank, but for some reason the executives just aren't prioritizing it. Every time you come across that for some reason reflex, stop, get curious. Assume that there is a reason and figure out what it might be. One time I had an executive who admittedly was not great at communicating their strategy. As a result, a lot of time was wasted and there was much frustration all around, both on the part of the team and, from what I can tell, on the part of the executive. Once again, empathy comes in to save the day. Knowing that there had to be a reasoning behind some of the decisions that didn't seem to make sense from the team level, I set out to figure out why. I'm telling you this story because it's important to recognize that in business, empathy is not just about emotional work, it's also intellectual work. In this case, I ended up going back to my MBA coursework and the formulas for present value of future cash flows in order to be able to explain to my team strategically why we should be shifting from supporting one kind of business to preferring another kind. This let them prioritize the right things in line with what the executive wanted, but just as importantly, it helped us avoid getting distracted by things that seemed like they were related to what was being asked, but weren't actually part of fulfilling the underlying strategy. Again, as you're able to better understand the why, you're better able to deliver value, and that makes you more valuable. Even if you hate office politics, empathy will help you understand and navigate it. Empathy will help you understand that even though this particular project or deadline isn't important to the business or customers, your boss needs it to happen on a certain timeline in order to get the trust of a key stakeholder that they need in order to be able to deliver the thing that is important to your customers. You don't have to agree with someone's conclusions to be able to understand how and why they came to those conclusions. Sometimes they really are wrong and it only makes sense from their perspective. But understanding their perspective lets you consciously choose to either counter it or let this one go in favor of fighting different battles a different time. The better you get at this, the more you unlock a superpower for navigating complex situations at work. Now, the final bit of empathy advice that I'll give you is what's written on my shirt. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. Sometimes the other person's being a jerk because they're a nasty, selfish person. But more often than not, they're just going through it themselves. Their mom's in the hospital, they almost got hit on the way to work, their boss is breathing down their neck. Their kid's in trouble, their spouse is sick, and they're worried about the state of the world. For their sake and for your sake, please be kind. Life is better when you're practicing kindness. And the office politics are less stressful when you realize that we're all just humans trying to figure this out together. Also, if you're the kind of person who can do this kind of work, investing in yourself and doing real mental and emotional labor to become better at work, even when most other people would just shrug and give up, you could absolutely be making more money than you are right now. I'm serious. You deserve a raise. You're doing the kinds of things that qualify you for making a lot more money. This video right here will tell you about all the things that I've found to unlock huge 50, even 100% raises so that you don't have to stumble around in the dark like I did in order to figure it out. If you're still watching, you should click like on this video, then go watch that one right now.